So we talked about the Derby purse, but that's like we were saying, I don't know how much that will really affect the cachet of the Derby, but there's a big potential change coming to the second leg of the Triple Crown, the Preakness. Now, for years, Pimlico has been left to rot, and Pimlico is a dump. But it's an institution in Baltimore, so I always thought it would be a shame if the Preakness went away from Pimlico and went to Laurel. Now it looks like the opposite might happen, that the Stronach Group is going to get out of the horse racing business in Maryland, and then Laurel's going to be no more, and there's going to be a huge redevelopment project to Pimlico to make that the long-term home for racing in the state of Maryland. It's a $400 million proposal from Governor Wes Moore. And it sounds like there's going to be a lot of the same people who from the Maryland Stadium Authority who built the Raven Stadium and who have overseen Camden Yards for all these years, two great stadiums by all measures and all reports. So basically, they're gonna close down Pimlico for the 2026 and 2027 Preaknesses. That's going to move, the race is going to move to Laurel that year if this is all approved. And then after that, Laurel will be kaput and Pimlico will be modernized and rejuvenated and will be the long-term hub for racing in Maryland. They're going to build a whole new training center as well. It sounds great. And honestly, I think this is a really positive development for Pimlico and for Baltimore in general. We'll see if it gets approved and if the wheels actually go in motion. But there's a lot to dissect here, because I think there's also there's going to be a lot of fallout from the Stronach Group getting rid of another track in their portfolio. So, John, just tell me broad view. What are you looking at?
Yeah, Joe, I think you did a great job of giving a lot of salient points. There's just a couple more that I didn't realize until I read the articles. Number one is that I didn't realize that the Maryland Horsemen and Breeders were receiving $60 million in annual subsidies from the state's casinos. So basically, every year the Maryland was basically giving $60 million to whether it's purse increases and or breeding incentivifications to the industry. So in my estimation, I think what the state of Maryland thought was, well, instead of giving them $60 million in subsidies, why don't we put the $60 million towards an actual asset that we'll own in the sense of renovating and updating Pimlico Racetrack. The second thing I didn't realize was that the state of Maryland has already pre-approved $375 million in bonds that have been authorized for the racing industry. So again, Maryland had that kind of in their back pocket, I think pre-COVID even, that they had the right and the ability to actually issue $375 million worth of bonds to assist with construction and renovation of a racing project. And the third thing I thought was really interesting, Joe, I've never, ever seen this before, where when an asset is traded, in this sense, Pimlico Racetrack, you normally think, okay, well, all of the intangibles that go along with Pimlico get put into that deal. Not so fast. First, the Stronach Group is holding on to the exclusive rights of the Preakness, which I thought was really interesting. So they sold everything except for basically that race. And I've never seen it before. It's almost like if Monmouth was sold, but they were holding on to the rights of the Haskell, or Parks is sold and they were holding on to the rights of the Cotillion and the PA Derby. I've never seen it where it was portioned off and they're holding on to that asset, which, if you push forward, it could be, Joe, where we're seeing after the, Laurel is kaput, and depending on how Pimlico goes, we could see the Derby being at Churchill Downs, and then maybe the Preakness being in Florida at Gulfstream, because Stronach still owns Gulfstream and Santa Anita. What do you think about that, having the Preakness at a different venue altogether? Because technically, First owns the Preakness.
Yeah, I hope not, because I say this as someone who's been to Baltimore and the Preakness multiple times and enjoys it, even though Pimlico is a dump right now, that there is a lot of pride. There's a lot of civic pride in Baltimore about the Preakness. And I think that's the only reason that a plan like this would have any kind of prayer of being successful, being approved and being successful, because Baltimoreans, I don't know what you call them, but they really do care about having the Preakness in their city. So I really hope that's not the case. And honestly, it seems like past governors have just kind of ignored Baltimore. I think Larry Hogan was the governor before that. He was a Republican. Wes Moore is a Democrat. And I think he's at least signaling an intent to revitalize Baltimore. And that's a big part of that is Pimilco. And I think, the heretofore abandonment of Pimilco is kind of a symbol of the abandonment of huge swaths of Baltimore by the previous administration. And it was a great American institution that was like left to rot because politicians didn't think it was worth saving. But I mean, who knows if the government can run it better than the Stronach Group? And I think in general, it's not great when racing founded companies get out of the game in any way, but that's going to happen regardless. Like Belinda Stronach clearly wants to minimize the company's involvement in racing over time. And like John's saying, only keep the real cash cows and the real brands that make them money. I think the bigger issue is that in the case of places like Golden Gate, no one's interested in stepping up to take over. So they're just going to, those tracks are just going to disappear. In this case, at least for now, it seems like the state of Maryland and the city of Baltimore are not only willing, but seem pretty enthusiastic to try to step up and fill that void. And I can hear it now in my fucking head, like, oh, you think the government's going to do a better job than private business? But actually, yes, I do. I think considering the alternative is a company that like clearly doesn't want to have that much racing anymore as time goes by, and Belinda takes over from Frank Stronach, and I think that's evidenced by them willing to throw Laurel under the bus completely. Like it was just like a year or so ago that the idea was to redevelop Laurel and make that the racing hub for Maryland. And now it's like, oh, well, you're going to take Pimlico's obligations away from us? Sure, we'll get rid of Laurel too. And right. I guess that's kind of where we are now, John. Yeah. It's just an era where some states think of racing, I think, as more of a necessary evil that provides jobs than a robust industry that's worth investing time and money into. But I don't know. It's early, but I think this administration, the Wes Moore administration, at least, is trying to make it work in Baltimore with the Preakness and Pimlico. So I think that's a positive sign overall.
It is. And it goes back to what we were talking about, years and years ago, about certain racetracks just need to kind of fall off in order to invigorate and strengthen the industry. And it's a shame because there's a lot of history at Laurel and they were basically year-round racing, and it was a place to run in the wintertime up here on the East Coast. And not that I would say that there's a ton of people that are going to be longing for for a Monday at Laurel in February, but there are some great races there, and there have been some good memories there. Joe, just to go back to what you were saying, that the correct term for people who live in Baltimore are Baltimoreans.
Baltimoreans?
Baltimoreans, yes. I looked it up. It was on Wikipedia, and you know that they're always right. Baltimoreans.
Okay. That sounds right. That sounds very official. No, but I like Baltimore. Obviously, there's some sketchy areas, and it's not what it was in its heyday. But the Inner Harbor is really beautiful, and it's a proud city with like a lot of great sports too. A lot of great sports legacy, and I think Pimlico and the Preakness is a huge part of that. So I'm hoping that this becomes the long-term home, like they're saying, because also I love city racetracks. Like that's one of the reasons that Aqueduct going away is a little bit of a bummer to me, because that's our city racetrack. Belmont's a little bit more suburban, so we'll see what happens. But I'm glad at least someone is stepping up from the government after Larry Hogan and previous administrations just left Pimlico to rot and turn into a national embarrassment.